Okay.
Okay, we're going to get on with the next panel, or the panel that's going to be featured tonight after the awards is going to be a panel consisting of Dylan Lopez, Joshua Espitia, Kristen Ruggles, and Shayna Ashley. So I guess if we can have the have all the attendees populate the chairs of honor up here.
Thank you.
Okay, and first up tonight, we're going to hear from Dylan Lopez. So the theme of the panel, this part of the panel tonight, is called Homebrewed, and it focuses on local poets. And we wanted to we didn't want to necessarily stick with the most absolutely traditional definition of poetry, so we also have a musical poet with us tonight as well. So we're going to start off with Dylan Lopez tonight, and just a few words about him and his poetry before he comes up and shares. Dylan Lopez's interest in poetry developed during his high school years and currently flourishes as a serious pursuit within the university career he presently pursues. His writing incorporates an upbringing centered around parochial schools and religious teachings, while also tackling the theme of love from a young adult's perspective. His lyrical imagery takes on mythical and allegorical proportions, exploring deep and personal metamorphoses with close relationships and the world around. The lyricism in his poems springs from the fountain of modernist poets such as Rubén Darío, crafting analogies for relationships from imagery steeped as much in the symbolism as mythological and Christian imagery. So if you could welcome to the podium, please, Dylan Lopez.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank the People's Poetry Festival Committee for this wonderful opportunity to present my work as a student and as someone on a creative journey. Moreover, I'd like to thank my professors and peers over at TAM-UCC that have been incredibly gracious and supportive with their time and efforts to help prepare me for this moment. This would not be possible without each and every one of you. Thank you all so much. So the poem I'm going to open with tonight is an older love poem for an older love, and this is called Kindred Spirits Like Driftwood. Strewn about our bare feet was a great mass of clumped shoreline, which unfurled itself to meet the approaching waves of the Gulf, slight and numerous, like the errant thoughts which blissed within me, as I stood silent beside a familiar companion, whose sly, ruby lips quivered as she stared past the sea, past the quiet sound where little ships and men alike limited themselves. So as to not disturb her sun-tinted tresses, she spoke without the intimacy of her gaze, which fixed itself to that primordial ocean. In a charged declaration, she pronounced her love for the shore, having lived beyond the extent of its briny scent, beyond the indistinguishable sight of its opaque viridian drink, to a place beyond the enchanting, indomitable open seas. She turned to me and said, I have seen this moment in my dreams. Two ex-lovers, too afraid to stare into one another. Two broken hearts that together make no complete whole. Two spirits of passion and anger that cannot be reconciled. How is it then that you called me to this wondrous place, this beauty that you'd never partake in, were it not for me standing here beside you? following that piece, I'd like to introduce you to a biblical narrative that immediately follows the fall of Adam and Eve. And this is called On the Perimeter of Eden. The two clay figures, freshly rebuked from paradise, turned to face their verdant eviction, which sprouted imposing gates of wrought roses with thorns for handles. All the lushness of the world retreated within, leaving behind only stubborn mud and obdurate stone. Cherubim descended upon the tree of life, from which the fruit of eternity sprung, and looked out with harsh eyes upon the labors of Adam, as the ground taunted his efforts with thorns and thistles for crops. His sweat irrigating barren fields and indifferent soil. With divine instilled animosity, Eve looked on in disgust as the gray serpent snickered along dry riverbeds and under sharpened bramble, his every taunt a singular drop of venom flowing into Adam's ears as he coiled his long body against the sickle. The progenitors of our shared lineage looked out to the eastern bastion of Eden, with soaring walls that seemed minuscule to their feelings of untenable guilt and painful remorse. A plight that rang empty to an indifferent God who alone watered the verdant gardens of creation. So, keeping in tune with the theme of creation, I'd like to read for you the winner of last year's Rob Jackson Poetry Contest, which marries two originating forces in a creative myth. It's called This World of Ours. From the blackened depths, I lifted the globe and raised it to meet the sky. From her touch came the winding rivers and primordial seas which rage eternal. Of my work, fertile woods and noble mountains that stand above all creation, sentinels of majesty. We marveled at our work, feet between virgin sands and gentle snow, the flame, tender and sweet, held in the foremost part of the heavens. So too the pale mother, whose faint luminance guides those weary spirits that take to darkness. And yet we felt the world an empty canvas still, and greater filled it with our boundless devotion. Of her passion sprung the ocean dwellers who glide upon viridian waves, and mine the woodland beasts and soaring heralds that claim dominion over the skies. Soon followed man, the product of bitter love. He refused all aspects of his creators, barring our appearance, pleading only for a companion to stand beside him during tempestuous storms and the awful, frigid nights that on rare occasion sought to envelop the infantile world's visage. Ultimately satisfied, we turned to one another and gave the sly mark of a lover's approval. Embraced, we resigned ourselves to the stars and dreamt of what we had created together. In keeping with the idea.
Sorry, I'm talking.
My bad.
Give me the potato, I deserve it.
In keeping in tune with the ideas of love that make up the vast sum of my work, I'd like to read another heart-filled poem about failed love, and it's called The Days Long Gone. Bitter lovers are we then, hearts loosely intertwined, strangling each other with painful, vitriol-filled romance. It wasn't so long ago that were married two mad spirits, divergent partners who took to each other like warring states, discordantly harmonious in our fixed assaults in retributive course. No more are we now, marble figures between clear running fountains, stoic benches and well-kept earthly gardens. No more our sculpted desires, flame-fueled passions to heat our stone-hearted encasements. Left are we then only with ourselves, departed from our flush personas of childlike loathing and detestable action, those consumed by still greater spiteful criticisms and lashing tongues that devour themselves. How are we, my obstinate companion, to remedy this sickly courtship? Is unfettered remorse not enough to carry us home to those prior days? So, jumping topics for a moment, I'd like to read a totally unrelated narrative about fishermen, a poem that came to me in a dream. It's called The Untidiness of the Ocean. I fear for those men who make life upon the dreary sea. Adrift, they surrender their fate to crude, primeval waves, each crushing swell a weighty shove against their soul. As those rough sailors cast wide nets to the deep, praying for a plentiful catch, for the islands starve this year. From the deeper seas came to dock a royal frigate, a scornful admiralty with no regard for the pelagic paupers of his lady's kingdom. For he commanded his company to raise the sails as the unwittingly favorable winds set them towards feeble fishermen. Without proper notice, the titanic oaken cruiser determined a broadside assault. Yet thence came from the abyssal dark a great leviathan from his bathymetric home, and the formidable beast struck with blind fervor her majesty's ship Colossus. The rising waves enveloped the stunned prey and swallowed whole a bleeding hull. The awful disturbance jumbled the sea life, filling the nets of humbled fishermen. This next poem is about a slight flirtatious relationship I had going during the university's fall semester with a friend from high school. Ultimately, nothing came of it except this poem. Yeah, not that trait. It's called The Insouciant Muse. I have thought longingly of that Spanish inferno, a tempered blaze of refined enchantment, a love-bearing complexion of sun-tinged ivory, adorned with locks of nightshade, alluring fruits, and quiet eyes that a young poet could lose himself in. On favorite days, she finds her way to me, dining in the heights, higher than the weathered steps of the Chichen Itza. She takes her place and sits with crossed legs, speaking softly with her subtle, blush, morganite-stained lips. Sly affections and strikes of comedy evoke little from her grace, for I can ascertain no sense of obligation from her subtle smiles and muted laughter. For she is a student of Seneca, a stoic who finds no pleasure in affection. Yet I am spurred ever onward by the fated indifference of this fatal love, my tempting companion, magnetic core. From the ruby precipice of her heart, I shall draw forth a vivid carmine romance or a sympathetic tragedy. So this next poem comes from a time as an altar server when I worked for the Catholic churches here in town, and it's about a wedding that I experienced in my 8th grade year of middle school. This is called The Wedding of Strangers. Delighted was I to be drawn of many names to serve a wedding during 8th grade geometry, a subject I've yet to master and a calling I've yet to answer. A man of many stories fumbled with the keys to the sacristy, but managed his task in time. As we donned our vestments and medallions, lit candles, and prepared the required literature, we heard the telltale irreverent noise of two opposed families greeting each other, soon to be joined by a singular pair of lovers that were but strangers months ago. When the bride and her keepers invaded the church's sacristy, we gathered our belongings and traversed the broken parking lot in full regalia, dust clinging to our robes. Inside, we dodged steel-tipped insults and Spanish curses before taking our place beside a flush, unsettled groom. After some time, the service got underway and remained unremarkable until the homily of the presiding father, who, cloaked in divine insanity, rambled on about the prevalence of divorce amongst young people, which united the disgruntled families in a sense of horror and gave the young couple something to ponder over as they cautiously exchanged rings with one another. One more? All right. This next poem is a dreamlike depiction with no real form other than some bland imagery made to evoke feelings of melancholy. Hope it works. It's called Monochromatic Monodies. The dull brush of heaven spread, crossed the sky, and drew all vibrancy from the vista, save for a miserable slate. The tone of the great ash fires was stricken, and they burned a smoky tinge, ascending unto weeping clouds and starless infinities. Placid leviathans lost their course in the abyss and ran their colossal bodies aground, for, alas, gray was the raging sea they called home. Soaring fowls turned from sublime heights as the hue of their ornate wings leapt forth, and they fell longingly to the earth, disgraced. I think that's all the time I have. You've been a wonderful audience, and again, thanks to the People's Poetry Festival Committee for having me on, and for everyone who made this possible.